My daughter's face crumpled as the HOA president shoved her into the deep end, shouting the pool is for real swimmers. She had no idea who she was messing with. 8 years as a British Royal Guard taught me how to stand perfectly still, but also how to plan the most spectacular revenge a community pool has ever witnessed. It was supposed to be a perfect Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sun hits just right, the breeze is gentle, and for once, just once, I thought my daughter Lily and I could have a normal day at our community pool without incident. Lily is 12, the kindest soul you'll ever meet, and she was born with cerebral palsy. She uses leg braces and sometimes a wheelchair, but she's fiercely independent. Swimming is her favorite activity, her freedom time, she calls it, because in the water, she moves like everyone else. "Dad, can we go to the deep end today?" Lily asked, her eyes sparkling with that determination I've come to both admire and fear. She'd been practicing with her physical therapist for weeks. "Let's start in the shallow end and see how it goes, Lillipad," I replied, using the nickname that always made her roll her eyes and smile at the same time. "What you need to understand about me, I'm not just any dad. I'm a British Royal Guard. Yes, those guys in the red coats and ridiculous bearskin hats who stand perfectly still while tourists try to make us laugh. I protected the royal family for 8 years, served 2 tours in Afghanistan before that, and have what my commanding officer calls impressive impulse control. Basically, I'm trained not to react to anything. My wife Emily died 3 years ago, leaving me as Lily's sole parent, and I'd taken a temporary stateside assignment for Lily's specialized medical treatment. We were both still adjusting to life in America, me to civilian clothes and being allowed to speak during daylight hours, and Lily to a new school where kids stared a little too long at her braces. As we approached the community pool, I spotted her immediately, a woman in a blinding white designer swimsuit, oversized sunglasses, and a wide-brimmed hat that could provide shade for half the pool. She was loudly directing a teenage lifeguard about the temperature of the water, while her perfectly coiffed blonde hair somehow defied both gravity and humidity. "That's Karen Westfield," whispered Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor who was settling into a lounge chair. "Neighborhood Association president. Treats this place like her personal kingdom. Her husband owns half the real estate in town." I nodded politely, helping Lily with her leg braces. 8 years as a Royal Guard teaches you to observe without judgment, to stand at attention through rain, sleet, and drunken tourists trying to make you blink. I figured I could handle one entitled pool tyrant. Karen's voice carried across the water. "Absolutely unacceptable. I specifically requested the pool temperature be 82 degrees for my aqua Pilates class. This is at least 79. The poor teenage lifeguard looked like he wanted to dissolve into the chlorine. "Ma'am, I don't control the heater, that's maintenance, and they don't work weekends." "Then call them. This is why I pay outrageous HOA fees." She snapped her fingers in his face like he was a particularly slow waiter. I helped Lily to the pool's edge, carefully removing her braces and setting them aside. "Ready for takeoff, Captain?" I asked our usual ritual. "Ready, Lieutenant Dad," she giggled, slowly lowering herself into the water. I was about to join her when a shadow fell across us both. "Excuse me," said a voice that somehow made those 2 words sound like a court summons. Karen Westfield stood over us, designer sunglasses pushed up into her hair, revealing eyes narrowed with irritation. "This section of the pool is reserved for my aqua Pilates class starting in 15 minutes. I gave her my best Royal Guard smile, polite, detached, and completely unyielding. "Good afternoon. I don't see any reservation signs, and my daughter has just gotten settled." Karen's face did this fascinating thing where it maintained a smile while simultaneously conveying murderous rage. "Well, there should be signs. I file the proper paperwork every week, and someone keeps moving them." She glanced accusingly at the teenage lifeguard, who suddenly found the pool's filtration system fascinating. "Perhaps we could share the space?" I suggested reasonably. "Lily doesn't need much room." That's when Karen noticed Lily's braces neatly placed by the pool edge. "Oh," she said, her voice shifting to a syrupy sweet tone that made my guard instincts tingle with warning. "I didn't realize." She turned toward Lily with a smile that reminded me of a documentary I'd once watched about predatory deep-sea fish. "Sweetie, wouldn't you be more comfortable in the kiddie pool? It's much safer for special needs children." Lily's face fell, and I felt my Royal Guard training kick in. Face impassive, posture straight, emotions locked down tighter than Buckingham Palace after dark. "My daughter is perfectly safe here with me," I replied evenly, "and she prefers this pool." Karen's artificial smile tightened. Well, I'm sure she does, but my class members paid good money, and they expect a certain atmosphere. And what atmosphere is that exactly? I inquired, still maintaining my guard-perfect posture. An uncluttered one, Karen snapped, gesturing toward Lily's braces. Those are a tripping hazard. I could report this to the association. Around us, other pool-goers were starting to notice the confrontation. Some pretended not to listen while obviously straining to hear every word. Others openly stared. Dad, maybe we should go, Lily whispered, her voice small and heard in a way that made me want to deploy every combat technique I'd ever learned. No, Lillipad, you've been looking forward to this all week, I said firmly, then turned back to Karen. The braces aren't in anyone's way, and we'll be done in an hour. Karen's perfectly Botoxed forehead attempted to furrow. I don't think you understand. I'm the president of the neighborhood association. Yes, I've been informed, I interrupted calmly. However, as I understand American law, this is a public accommodation, and my daughter has every right to be here. Karen's face turned an interesting shade of crimson that clashed spectacularly with her white swimsuit. For a moment, I thought she might spontaneously combust, which, given my Royal Guard training to remain still even in extreme circumstances, presented an interesting hypothetical challenge. Fine, she finally hissed. But keep her on that side of the pool. My ladies will be here any minute, and we need space for our routines. With that, she stormed off to terrorize the snack bar attendant about the lack of cucumber in the water. I slipped into the pool beside Lily, who looked up at me with worried eyes. Are we in trouble now, Dad? Not at all, I assured her, helping her practice her flutter kicks. Some people just forget their manners sometimes. Like when those tourists try to make you laugh by doing the chicken dance. Lily asked innocently. I chuckled. Much worse than the chicken dance, Lillipad. That least was funny. For the next 20 minutes, Lily and I enjoyed our swim, while Karen's Aqua Pilates class, consisting of exactly 4 other women with identical sunglasses and attitudes, occupied the other side of the pool. Occasionally, Karen would shoot us venomous glares whenever Lily laughed too loudly or splashed with too much enthusiasm. Little did I know, this poolside Cold War was about to escalate into an international incident that would test every ounce of my Royal Guard training. Because Karen Westfield was about to commit an act that would make facing down drunken football hooligans outside Buckingham Palace seem like a pleasant afternoon tea. And I had no idea that, by the end of the day, the entire neighborhood would discover exactly what happens when you push a Royal Guard too far. Karen's Aqua Pilates class was in full swing, a synchronized display of half-hearted leg lifts and exaggerated breathing that seemed designed more for gossiping than exercise. Their voices carried across the water like a flock of particularly judgmental seagulls. Did you see what Sharon wore to the fundraiser? In October, Harold said the property values on this block are dropping because some people aren't maintaining their lawns to standard. My Brixton got into Yale. Early decision, of course. I was helping Lily practice her backstroke in our designated exile zone when I noticed her getting tired. Want to take a break, Lillipad? I asked, supporting her as she floated. Can we try the deep end first, Dad? Just once? I've been practicing with Dr. Melissa. Her eyes were so hopeful I couldn't say no. All right, just a quick visit. Hold on to me the whole time. I agreed. As we slowly made our way toward the deep end, I noticed Karen's hawk-like attention shift in our direction. She paused mid-leg lift, her eyes narrowing behind her designer sunglasses. Ladies, let's switch to standing routines, she announced loudly. We need more space. Her emphasis on those last 2 words was about as subtle as a cavalry charge. The Pilates ladies began spreading out, their movements growing more expansive, arms windmilling dangerously close as we passed. One woman, whose name tag actually read Brinley, with a heart over the eye, nearly smacked Lily in the face with an enthusiastic arm circle. Careful there, I said politely, gently steering Lily away. Sorry, Brinley chirped, not sounding sorry at all. We just need so much room for proper form. Lily squeezed my hand tighter. I could feel her tension, but also her determination. My daughter, I'd learned early on, had inherited my stubbornness along with her mother's kind heart, a combination that made her both incredibly lovable and absolutely unstoppable once she set her mind to something. We reached the 5-foot marker, where the pool floor began to slope downward. Lily was just under 5 feet tall, so this was already challenging territory for her. We could turn back, I offered. Just a little farther, she insisted. I want to touch the deep end wall. Dr. Melissa says setting goals is important. We were almost at the 6-foot marker when Karen appeared directly in our path, materializing like some chlorine-scented apparition. "This area is for swimmers only," she declared loudly. I felt my Royal Guard training kick in, back straight, face neutral, tone even. "My daughter is swimming with my assistants." "That's not swimming. That's being dragged around," Karen sniffed dismissively. "It's a safety issue." "I'm not being dragged," Lily piped up, her chin lifted defiantly despite the slight quiver in her voice. "I'm practicing my swimming." Karen bent down, bringing her face uncomfortably close to Lily's. That saccharine smile returned, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetie, this pool has rules for a reason. The deep end is for people who can swim independently. Why don't you go back to the shallow end where it's safe for someone like you?" I felt Lily flinch beside me, and something dangerous stirred behind my carefully maintained composure. In my 8 years as a Royal Guard, I'd maintained perfect stillness while tourists did everything short of lighting themselves on fire to make me react. I'd stood motionless in driving rain for 6 hours. I'd kept my expression neutral when a pigeon relieved itself directly on my shoulder during a royal inspection. But hearing someone speak to my daughter that way made me want to break every rule in the Royal Guard handbook. Before I could respond, Lily spoke up. "I can swim. I've been practicing for months. I just need help sometimes." "Well, isn't that special?" Karen said with a patronizing pat on Lily's head that made my daughter shrink back against me. "But rules are rules. I don't make them. I just enforce them." "Actually," came a voice from behind us, "there's no rule against assisted swimming in the deep end." It was the teenage lifeguard who had apparently found his backbone somewhere in the filter system. "As long as she has adult supervision, she's good," he added, nervously pushing his glasses up his nose. Karen's head swiveled toward him like an owl spotting prey. "Excuse me? When did you become an expert on pool regulations?" Well, I got certified as a lifeguard," he replied, immediately looking like he regretted his momentary courage. Karen's face did that fascinating thing again, where it tried to contort with rage while remaining largely immobile. "We'll see about your certification after I speak with your supervisor, Tyler," she said, venom dripping from every syllable as she read his name tag. Poor Tyler visibly wilted. "I was just saying what the actual rules are, ma'am." "The rules," Karen hissed, "are what the neighborhood association decides they are. And, as president—" "Mom, you're being weird again," interrupted a teenage girl who'd appeared poolside, looking mortified in the way only teenagers can. She was about 16, wearing an expensive-looking swimsuit and an expression of permanent embarrassment. "Can you not?" "Not now, Madison," Karen snapped without looking at her daughter. "Mommy's handling a situation." Madison rolled her eyes spectacularly. "You're not handling anything. You're being She glanced at Lily and apparently decided to moderate her language. "A pool dictator." "Again." "Madison Eloise Westfield," Karen gasped, finally breaking her death stare with the lifeguard. "We don't use that tone." Madison sighed dramatically. "Whatever. I'm going to Dad's early if you're going to be like this all day." She turned to leave, then paused to look at Lily and me. "Sorry about her," she said with genuine contrition before stalking off. Karen watched her daughter leave, her face flushing an even deeper shade of outrage. When she turned back to us, I could practically see the steam rising from her designer swimsuit. "Now look what you've done," she spat. "You've upset my daughter." The mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion would have won Olympic gold. "I believe your daughter was upset by your behavior, not ours," I replied calmly, still maintaining perfect Royal Guard posture despite being chest-deep in water. That's when I felt Lily tugging on my arm. "Dad, can we just go to the wall and then go back? I still want to touch it." "Of course, Lillipad," I said, ignoring Karen's increasingly murderous glare. We attempted to move around Karen, but she sidestepped directly into our path again. "I wasn't finished speaking," she said icily. "But we were finished listening," I replied, with the same polite, immovable tone I'd used when a particularly aggressive tourist had tried to make me laugh by performing an interpretive dance to God Save the Queen while wearing Union Jack underwear. Outside, in February, something dangerous flashed in Karen's eyes. "You people come here, thinking you can just ignore our community standards." "You people," I repeated quietly. "Foreigners," she clarified with a sniff. I can hear her accent. "Probably don't even own property here, just renting from the Millers while they're in Europe." "How I secure housing isn't relevant to my daughter's right to swim," I said, feeling my patience wearing dangerously thin. "It is when you're using our facilities," Karen insisted. "I've worked hard to maintain standards in this neighborhood." Do you have any idea how much my husband donated to get this pool renovated? I imagine less than the amount you're about to lose in the lawsuit if you continue harassing a disabled child, came yet another voice. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and a no-nonsense swimsuit had appeared next to us. I recognized her as Dr. Abernathy, a retired civil rights attorney who lived 3 doors down from our rental house. She gave me a quick wink before turning her formidable attention to Karen. Martha, Karen said tightly, this doesn't concern you. Discrimination always concerns me, Karen. Dr. Abernathy replied cheerfully. It's how I pay for my lake house. The pool had gone eerily quiet. Even the Pilates ladies had stopped their half-hearted exercises to watch the drama unfold. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water and the distant scream of a child being denied ice cream at the snack bar. Karen's face was now approaching a shade I'd only previously seen on the Queen's Guard's ceremonial uniform. This is ridiculous. I'm simply enforcing safety rules. No, you're being a bully, Dr. Abernathy interrupted pleasantly, and not a very smart one, considering there are at least 12 witnesses. For a moment, it seemed Karen might actually explode. Then, abruptly, her demeanor changed. Her face smoothed into that artificial smile, her posture relaxed, and she let out a tinkling laugh that sounded about as genuine as a 3-pound note. Oh, Martha, always the dramatist. I'm simply concerned for the child's safety. She turned to Lily with that predatory smile. Isn't that right, sweetie? We just want you to be safe. Lily, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke up. My name is Lily, not Sweetie, and I'm very safe with my dad. He's a royal. I squeezed her hand gently. We generally didn't broadcast my occupation, as it tended to lead to endless questions and occasional demonstrations of truly terrible British accents. A really good swimmer, Lily finished, catching my hint. Karen's gaze flicked between us suspiciously. Then she shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. Well, I suppose if Martha is so concerned, I can allow an exception this one time. She said it like she was granting us a royal pardon. Just stay out of the way of my class. With that, she turned and began walking away through the water, her nose so high in the air she was in danger of drowning from the splashback. Well, that was entertaining, Dr. Abernathy said cheerfully. Need any help, you two? We're fine, thank you. I replied, grateful for her intervention. Just heading to touch the wall and then back. Carry on then, she said with a salute that told me she'd somehow figured out my occupation despite our discretion. I'll keep an eye on Her Majesty over there. Lily and I continued our slow progress toward the deep end wall. We were almost there when I heard rapid splashing behind us. I turned just in time to see Karen charging through the water toward us like an angry, designer-clad torpedo. Wait, she called out, her voice urgent. You dropped something. I instinctively looked around, though I knew we hadn't brought anything besides Lily's braces, which were safely on the pool deck. That moment of distraction was all it took. Karen reached us, and what happened next occurred so quickly I almost couldn't process it. She stumbled, or pretended to stumble, and her hand shot out, connecting solidly with Lily's shoulders. Oh, Karen exclaimed with exaggerated surprise. I'm so clumsy. I felt Lily's hand torn from mine as she was shoved forward, propelled by the force of Karen's accidental push. My daughter let out a startled cry as she plunged forward into the deep water, immediately sinking beneath the surface. 8 years of Royal Guard training, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and countless hours standing perfectly still while being provoked vanished in an instant. In their place was pure paternal instinct. I dove after my daughter, grabbing her and pulling her to the surface within seconds. Lily emerged sputtering and frightened, but otherwise unharmed. I held her securely with one arm while she coughed and caught her breath. You're okay, Lillipad. I've got you, I assured her, my heart pounding with adrenaline and something much darker. When I turned to face Karen, still holding Lily safely against me, the temperature of the water around us seemed to drop several degrees. Karen was standing there with a hand pressed theatrically to her chest, the picture of innocent concern. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I completely lost my balance. But her eyes told a different story. There was something satisfied in them, something smug that said the accident was anything but. The lifeguards whistled blue sharply. Is everyone okay? Tyler called, already moving toward the edge of the pool nearest to us. We're fine, I called back, my voice unnaturally calm even to my own ears. I turned to Karen, who was still maintaining her performance of concerned innocence. That, I said quietly, was no accident. Are you accusing me of something? Karen gasped, looking around performatively for witnesses. It was clearly an accident. Anyone could see that, but several people were shaking their heads. They had seen. They knew. Dr. Abernathy appeared at the pool's edge. Lily, honey, come on up here with me while your dad has a word with Mrs. Westfield. I helped Lily to the edge where Dr. Abernathy wrapped her in a towel, whispering something that made my daughter giggle despite her ordeal. Then I turned back to Karen. In my time as a royal guard, I had perfected the art of stillness, of silence, of watching without revealing a single thought or emotion. But in that moment, as I looked at the woman who had deliberately pushed my disabled daughter into deep water, I revealed everything. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I didn't even move. I simply stood there, water dripping from my face, and I let Karen Westfield see exactly who she was dealing with. And for the first time since we'd met, Karen looked afraid, because she finally realized she hadn't just encountered an anonymous foreign dad and his disabled daughter. She had provoked a royal guard, and her reign of pool terror was about to come to a spectacular end. Karen's momentary flash of fear quickly disappeared behind a mask of indignation. I don't appreciate the way you're looking at me, she huffed, backing up a step in the water. It was an accident. I remained perfectly still, channeling every second of my Royal Guard training. When I finally spoke, my voice was so quiet that Karen had to lean forward to hear me. In my line of work, I said evenly, I've learned to recognize threats, to anticipate attacks, to identify when someone is about to do something dangerous. Karen's lips thinned to a barely visible line. Are you threatening me? Because I know the sheriff personally, and I'm not threatening you. I interrupted calmly. I'm educating you. Her artificial laugh echoed across the now silent pool. On what exactly? Consequences. That single word hung in the air between us. Around the pool, people were openly staring now, most pretending to be busy with sunscreen or magazines while obviously straining to hear every word. I moved toward the pool steps with deliberate calm, each motion precise and controlled. Enjoy the rest of your class, Mrs. Westfield. We'll be leaving now. Karen's relief was palpable as she realized I wasn't going to make a scene. Yes, that's probably for the best. Perhaps the kiddie pool next time? I didn't respond, simply exiting the water with the same measured pace I used when changing guard at Buckingham Palace. I collected Lily's braces and helped her put them on, all while maintaining perfect Royal Guard composure. Are you okay, Lillipad? I asked quietly. Lily nodded, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. Why doesn't she like me, Dad? My heart cracked a little at the question. Some people, I said carefully, are so unhappy with themselves that they can't stand seeing joy in others, especially when that joy overcomes challenges. Dr. Abernathy, who was still sitting with us, nodded approvingly. Your father is exactly right, Lily. And do you know what the best revenge is against people like that? Lily shook her head. Living well, Dr. Abernathy said with a wink. And maybe a little karma. I helped Lily to her feet, nodding gratefully to Dr. Abernathy. Thank you for your help earlier. Anytime, she replied, then lowered her voice. And if you're planning what I think you're planning, I want front row seats. I merely smiled, neither confirming nor denying her suspicions. As we gathered our things to leave, I caught sight of Tyler the lifeguard hovering nearby, looking conflicted. Sir, he said hesitantly, I should file an incident report about what happened. That push wasn't an accident. I saw it clearly. I'd appreciate that, I replied. But I suspect Mrs. Westfield might make things difficult for you if you do. Tyler straightened his shoulders slightly. My dad always says doing the right thing is rarely the easy thing, and she's been terrorizing everyone all summer. I felt a surge of respect for the young man. Then by all means, file your report. And Tyler? Thank you for standing up for my daughter earlier. He blushed slightly. No problem, sir. As we headed toward the exit, I heard Karen's voice rising again behind us, already berating one of her Pilates ladies for improper form. The incident already forgotten in her mind, just another assertion of her dominance over her chlorinated kingdom. Little did she know what was coming. The next morning was Sunday, and I was up at 5 a.m., a habit from my Royal Guard days that civilian life hadn't broken. I made tea, proper tea, with a teapot and everything, not those barbaric bags Americans dunk in microwave water, and sat down to make some calls. First was to my old commanding officer, Colonel Blackwood, who found my situation so amusing he almost choked on his breakfast. She did what to Lily? He spluttered after I explained the situation. And she has no idea who you are? None whatsoever, I confirmed. Oh, this is too perfect, Jenkins. Consider your request approved. I'll make the calls myself. Next was to Dr. Abernathy, who answered on the first ring despite the early hour. "I've been waiting for this call," she said by way of greeting. "What's the plan?" I explained, and her delighted cackle was almost worth yesterday's ordeal on its own. "I'll spread the word," she promised. Subtly, of course. My third call was to Madison, Karen's teenage daughter, whose number I'd gotten from Lily's phone. Apparently, the girls had met at the community center's art class and had been friendly until Karen had forbidden the association. "Hello." Madison answered sleepily. "Madison, this is Lily's father. I apologize for the early call, but I need a small favor." By the time I hung up, Operation Royal Consequence was fully in motion. Monday morning found me at the community pool again, this time alone. Karen's Aqua Pilates class was scheduled for 10 a.m., and I arrived at 9:15, dressed not in swim trunks but in the full glory of my Royal Guard dress uniform. Scarlet tunic, navy trousers with red stripe, white belt, and bearskin hat. I called in a favor to have it shipped overnight. The maintenance man nearly dropped his skimmer when he saw me. Sir, the pool doesn't open until 10. I handed him an official-looking envelope. Special event, all cleared with management. He glanced at the letter, eyes widening at the royal seal. "Yes, sir. Can I, help with anything? Just open the gate, please, and perhaps find a good viewing spot for later." By 9:45, I was in position, standing at perfect attention beside the deep end, facing the entrance gate, bearskin hat making me nearly 7 feet tall. My posture was impeccable, my expression stoic, my eyes fixed forward in the 1,000-yard stare that had served me through countless royal ceremonies. Word had spread quickly, thanks to Dr. Abernathy's subtle phone tree. The pool area began filling with spectators pretending to be there for ordinary swimming. Mrs. Peterson arrived with her entire bridge club. Tyler, the lifeguard, showed up an hour early for his shift, accompanied by what appeared to be his entire extended family. Even the maintenance man had called his wife to bring the kids. At precisely 9:58, a sleek white SUV pulled into the premium parking spot near the entrance, the one with the reserved for HOA president sign. Karen emerged, designer sunglasses already in place despite the early hour, carrying a monogrammed tote bag and a rolled yoga mat. She was so busy checking her phone that she didn't notice anything unusual until she reached the pool gate. Then she froze, her perfectly manicured hand suspended mid-air as she finally registered my presence. For a long moment, she simply stared, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and a dawning horror of recognition. "Good morning, Mrs. Westfield," called Dr. Abernathy cheerfully from her lounge chair. "Lovely day for Pilates, isn't it?" Karen didn't respond, her eyes fixed on me, or more specifically on my uniform. I remained perfectly still, staring straight ahead as I'd been trained to do. Finally, she seemed to collect herself. "What is this?" she demanded, storming across the pool deck toward me. "Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. "Hello, I'm talking to you." She waved a hand in front of my face, exactly like the tourists who thought they could break my composure outside Buckingham Palace. I remained impassive, staring straight ahead. Karen turned to the growing crowd. "What is going on? Why is he dressed like that?" Nobody answered her directly. They just smiled and found comfortable viewing positions. Karen's Pilates ladies began arriving, stopping in confusion at the spectacle. "Karen," one ventured. "What's happening? Is this some kind of theme class?" "No, Brinley, it is not a theme class," Karen snapped. "This is that foreign man from yesterday, playing some kind of ridiculous prank." She turned back to me, her voice dropping to a hiss. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to leave. Now, or I'm calling security." Still, I didn't move, didn't blink, remained the perfect royal guard. Karen pulled out her phone and made a show of dialing. "Hello? Security?" "Yes, there's an intruder at the community pool, dressed in some kind of costume and refusing to leave." She waited, then her face darkened. "What do you mean you've been informed?" "Informed by whom?" Another pause. "The British Embassy? That's absurd." Her voice rose several octaves. "I don't care what kind of paperwork they sent. This is private property and—" She stopped abruptly, listening to whatever the security officer was saying. Her face, already flushed with anger, turned an alarming shade of purple. "Fine," she finally snapped, ending the call. She turned to face me again, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Very funny. You've had your little joke. Now move so I can start my class." I remained perfectly still. "Move!" she shouted, losing her composure entirely. That's when Colonel Blackwood appeared, resplendent in his own dress uniform, medals gleaming in the morning sun. Mrs. Westfield, he said crisply, his authoritative British accent cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. I'm Colonel James Blackwood of Her Majesty's Royal Guard. Karen blinked rapidly, looking between Colonel Blackwood and me with growing alarm. What is this? This, Colonel Blackwood said pleasantly, is Staff Sergeant William Jenkins, one of our most decorated Royal Guards, currently on temporary assignment in the United States. I don't understand, Karen stammered, her usual confidence evaporating. It's quite simple, Colonel Blackwood continued. Yesterday, you assaulted the daughter of a Royal Guard, a disabled child, no less. That is problematic. I didn't assault anyone, Karen protested. It was an accident. Was it? Colonel Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Because we have 12 sworn statements that say otherwise. He patted a folder tucked under his arm. Fascinating reading. I particularly enjoyed the one from your daughter, Madison. Karen's head whipped around, and I could see Madison standing at the back of the crowd, arms crossed defiantly. You? Karen sputtered, pointing at Madison. We will discuss this later, young lady. Looking forward to it, Mom, Madison called back with mock cheerfulness. Colonel Blackwood cleared his throat. Staff Sergeant Jenkins has shown remarkable restraint. Had this incident occurred in London, you would already be having a very uncomfortable conversation with diplomatic security. This is ridiculous, Karen said, but her voice had lost its edge. You can't intimidate me with costumes and threats. Costumes? Colonel Blackwood looked genuinely amused. Mrs. Westfield, these are the official uniforms of the Royal Guard. And as for threats, I haven't made any. I'm simply here to observe a demonstration. Demonstration? Karen repeated weakly. Indeed, Colonel Blackwood smiled thinly. Staff Sergeant Jenkins will now demonstrate the traditional Royal Guard response to those who threaten those under their protection. Karen took an involuntary step backward. Is he going to hurt me? Good heavens, no. Colonel Blackwood looked shocked at the suggestion. The Royal Guard doesn't hurt people. We merely educate them. He turned to me and nodded once. Staff Sergeant, you may proceed. At his command, I finally moved. With precise, ceremonial steps, I marched directly to the edge of the pool, right at the deep end where Lily had been pushed. I stopped, pivoted with military precision, and faced the crowd. The silence was deafening as everyone waited for what would happen next. Mrs. Karen Westfield, I announced, my voice carrying across the pool with parade ground authority. Yesterday at approximately 13:47 hours, you deliberately shoved my disabled daughter, Lily Jenkins, into the deep end of this pool, endangering her safety and violating Section 4, Paragraph 3 of the Community Pool Regulations regarding physical contact with other swimmers. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a designer-clad goldfish. That's not what. I wasn't finished. I continued with the same calm authority. As a member of Her Majesty's Royal Guard, I am trained to respond to threats with appropriate and measured action. The crowd was so silent, you could have heard a sunscreen bottle drop. My response, I announced, begins now. With that, I turned back to face the pool and blew a whistle I concealed in my hand. From a bathhouse emerged 20 Royal Guards in full ceremonial dress. My former unit, who had been more than happy to use some leave time for this special operation when Colonel Blackwood explained the situation. They marched in perfect formation, their boots making synchronized clicks against the pool deck. The crowd parted automatically, mothers grabbing phones to record, fathers standing a little straighter as if in the presence of royalty. What is happening? Karen whispered, her voice barely audible over the precise marching. The guards took positions around the pool, forming a scarlet perimeter. Then, at another whistle blast, they all turned inward to face the water. Colonel Blackwood stepped forward. Mrs. Westfield, in recognition of your contribution to the community, we would like to present a special aquatic demonstration of the changing of the guard, Royal Pool Edition. On cue, a brass band appeared through the pool gates, the instruments gleaming in the morning sun. They launched into God Save the Queen, the notes soaring over the stunned crowd. And then my fellow guards began their routine, a perfectly choreographed, absurdly formal, and utterly hilarious aquatic version of the changing of the guard ceremony. They marched into the pool fully dressed in their ceremonial uniforms, bearskin hats and all, performing their precise movements while water sloshed around their knees, then waists, then chests. The crowd roared with laughter as the dignified guards maintained absolute composure, executing perfect turns while completely submerged except for their bearskin hats, which floated majestically on the surface. Karen stood frozen, her Pilates class forgotten, as 20 royal guards effectively commandeered her precious aqua Pilates time slot for the most ridiculous military display in history. This is, she stammered. Official diplomatic business, Colonel Blackwood supplied helpfully. All permits have been filed with your homeowners association. Signed by the association president, your daughter Madison. Actually, apparently, there was an emergency board meeting last night. Quite unanimous, I understand. Karen whirled around to find Madison, who gave a little finger wave from beside the snack bar. You can't do this. Karen finally found her voice. This is MY pool time. Actually, Dr. Abernathy chimed in, holding up an official-looking document. The board voted to rescind your permanent reservation. Something about abuse of power and creating a hostile swimming environment. Oh, and you've been removed as association president. Effective immediately. Karen's designer bag slipped from her nerveless fingers, landing with a splash in a puddle created by the ceremonial guard's entrance. But my Pilates class has been rescheduled, offered Brinley brightly. We voted. Thursday's work better anyway. Karen looked around wildly, finding no allies among her former subjects. Her Pilates empire was crumbling before her eyes, and all she could do was watch as royal guards performed synchronous swimming in full uniform. And one more thing, I added, finally breaking character completely. We've established the Lily Jenkins Accessible Swimming Program, fully funded by the Royal Guard Benevolent Fund. Starting next week, this pool will offer special hours for children with disabilities to learn water safety and enjoy swimming without judgment. The crowd erupted in applause. Karen's face cycled through every color a face possibly could. You planned all this because of one little push, she whispered. No, I replied quietly. I planned all this because you hurt my daughter and showed no remorse. The Royal Guard protects what they love, Mrs. Westfield. Always. Just then, the pool gate opened again, and Lily appeared in her wheelchair, pushed by a smiling young woman in physical therapy scrubs. The crowd parted to let them through, many reaching out to high-five my daughter as she passed. Dad, Lily called out, eyes wide with wonder as she took in the spectacle. Are those your friends from London? Yes, Lillipad, I confirmed. They came to help teach a very important lesson about pool safety. Lily looked at the guards performing their ceremonial inspection while neck-deep in chlorinated water, then at Karen's thunderstruck expression and burst into delighted giggles. This is the best day ever. Karen made one last desperate attempt to salvage her dignity. This is completely unprofessional. I'll be filing a complaint with the British Embassy. Feel free, Colonel Blackwood replied cheerfully. I believe you'll be speaking with my wife. She's the cultural attaché. Lovely woman. Terribly fond of children. Karen finally snapped. With a sound somewhere between a growl and a shriek, she spun on her designer sandals and stomped toward the exit, only to slip on the wet concrete and tumble spectacularly into the shallow end with a splash that soaked several bystanders. She surfaced, mascara running down her face, designer swimsuit twisted awkwardly, and $300 sunglasses floating away toward the filter. The pool fell silent for one perfect moment. Then, from her wheelchair, Lily called out in her clear, innocent voice, "Don't worry, Mrs. Westfield. The shallow end is much safer for beginners." The entire pool erupted in laughter and spontaneous applause. Karen dragged herself out of the pool, dignity in tatters, and squished her way to the exit without another word. As she pushed open the gate to leave, I couldn't resist one parting shot. "Mrs. Westfield," I called after her. "One final thing." She paused but didn't turn around. "The Queen sends her regards." Her shoulders stiffened, and then she was gone, leaving only a trail of puddles and the remnants of her reign of terror. The aquatic changing of the guard ceremony continued for another 30 minutes, drawing a crowd that eventually included half the neighborhood and 3 local news crews who'd gotten wind of the diplomatic event. Later, as Lily and I watched the guards perform their finale, a surprisingly graceful formation that spelled out Lily when viewed from the lifeguard tower, Dr. Abernathy settled into a chair beside us. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "in 40 years of practicing law, I've never seen justice served quite so moistly." Lily giggled. "Did you see her face when she fell in? It was like..." She mimicked Karen's expression of shock and outrage, making Dr. Abernathy snort with laughter. I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders. "Remember what I told you about the Royal Guard motto?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Never explain, never complain." "Exactly," I said. "But I think we need to add a third line just for us. "What's that?" she asked. I looked at the pool where my former unit was now teaching impromptu, synchronized swimming to delighted neighborhood children, their red tunics billowing underwater like exotic sea creatures. Never push a royal guard's daughter into the deep end. Dr. Abernathy raised her lemonade in a toast. "I'll drink to that." As we watched the festivities continue, Madison appeared beside us, looking somewhat shell-shocked but pleased. "So," she said casually, "being HOA president is kind of cool." My first official act was banning the phrase, "This area is reserved from pool vocabulary." "Excellent policy," I approved. My second act, she continued with a mischievous grin, was approving the installation of a wheelchair-accessible pool ramp. "Construction starts next week." Lily's face lit up. "Really?" Madison nodded. "Mom always voted it down because it would disrupt the aesthetic. But turns out when you're not the president anymore, your aesthetic opinions matter a lot less." "Speaking of your mother," I ventured, "will you be in much trouble?" Madison snorted. "Dad's picking me up in 10 minutes. I'm staying with him for a while." He thought this whole thing was hilarious. They're divorced, obviously, and said Mom's had it coming for years. As if on cue, a sleek sports car pulled into the parking lot, and a man who looked like an older male version of Madison got out, surveying the scene with evident amusement. "That's him," Madison said. "I should go." "But Lily, there's an art class at the community center on Wednesdays if you want to come. I'm teaching it now." "I'd love to," Lily replied enthusiastically. As Madison left, Colonel Blackwood approached, dripping wet, but looking immensely satisfied. "Mission accomplished, I'd say," he announced. "Haven't had this much fun since we put itching powder in the prince's ceremonial gloves." I raised an eyebrow. "Sir, I don't believe that's a story for public consumption." He winked at Lily. "Your father's right. Terribly classified. Forget I mentioned it." Lily mimed zipping her lips, but her eyes sparkled with delight. As the day wound down and the guards began packing up their now sopping uniforms, Tyler the lifeguard approached us, still looking slightly dazed. "Sir, the manager wants to know if you'd be interested in teaching a water safety class, and possibly self-defense, and maybe British history." I laughed. "Tell him I'd be happy to discuss it, though I think my ceremonial uniform may need some significant dry cleaning first." Later that evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me thoughtfully. "Dad, do you think Karen learned her lesson?" I considered this. "I'm not sure anyone truly changes overnight, Lillipad, but I do think she'll think twice before pushing anyone around again, literally or figuratively." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Good, because everyone deserves to swim without being scared." "Indeed they do," I agreed, kissing her forehead. "Indeed they do." As I turned out her light, my phone pinged with a notification. It was an email from the British Embassy. Apparently, Karen had indeed filed a complaint, only to have it rerouted to Colonel Blackwood's wife, who had responded with a formal invitation to a charity fundraiser for accessible swimming programs. The subject line read, "The Queen requests the pleasure of your attendance." I chuckled to myself as I imagined Karen's face upon receiving it. Some lessons were taught with discipline, some with dignity, and some, apparently, with 20 Royal Guard performing synchronized swimming in full ceremonial dress. But the most important lesson, the one I hoped Lily would remember long after the chlorine smell faded from my uniform, was simpler. Stand up for what's right, even when standing perfectly still. And if all else fails, call in the Royal Guard.